Live streaming is on.
She
That was so scary. Oh,
Yeah,
hello.
it's like I'd say 75.
Oh, like no, doing that.
Really?
Yeah, because like all the this and like the machine without light path and stuff, like
It's not showing.
no, but I mean the park around that, like that was like
Is it
yeah.
is it discoverable? It wasn't carrying load. I think it is still carrying load.
And then there's the originally the IPM building. Yeah.
And it won't go there. Oh yeah? I'll try to charge sequence. Oh yeah, so.
I'll see what.
But it does sound like a good sound. So maybe we just want to like have a little chat about like timeline for today, like the agenda, so we don't So for today, maybe we could make the present. We could try to condense. We could do the presentation, record that, and then have discussion, like question discussion after, so that the presentation kind of isn't super long. Does that sound good? 1 to 3 p.m. Oh, that's already 1:30. We still will be there by the 3 p.m. deadline.
I mean, first of all, we're missing Garfield in this. Yeah. They asked to start without them trying to make it present. But I was not aware that we were going to be dealing with all
Yeah,
of these
we can
items.
totally like
I knew about
shorten it.
this.
We can shorten it.
And that.
Yeah, we can shorten it.
Yeah, I think what we had agreed to was the history, content settings, and whatnot, and then we were going to appoint members of the board to positions, and then down to committees.
The mid-form committees we've already done.
Did we appoint the board people?
Well,
Yes.
we have titles. I don't know.
Oh,
That's
okay.
what it'd be
So we were doing
like.
committees.
Well,
So our finances is definitely not.
but we could do history and then committees and then see how much time we have left.
Yeah.
What's that say?
Yeah, but yeah. We don't have to talk about projects because it's all in our annual report.
Yeah, I feel like everybody present knows everything that I need to talk about. I didn't realize we were making a video for the public. I would have combed my hair differently.
Oh, so it's not a video.
I'm
public.
confused about the goal of this meeting and also
Yeah.
where we are and how we are right now. I'm a bit confused.
Okay. Maybe for context. So the idea of recording is there's some people who can't come, and like Caspian, Jonah, and some staff who can't come. So we thought, well, if we're doing a presentation, let's record it so we can share it with them after. And then we could even continue to use the presentation.
Did Caspian say, and this is troubling to me because I was feeling like getting off of HR, and he's taking over it. But did he say at the meeting he's all booked for August, or he's in another country or something? Is he?
No,
Is he
no.
available?
It's Hugo who's on that. Caspian wasn't
He's
available.
unavailable.
He's organizing the conference.
So yesterday I had to write a memo because there was some pressing things. This is Friday. He needs to take over for meetings, things like that, just like urgent things. And I think for the committee of human resource, that's for me it's a priority because there's pressing things. Who's getting hired in the fall? I'd like to make a report and here's the problems. And I don't see this meeting to help.
Yeah, well, actually,
Middle
We're not
actually.
all here.
that was
Right.
something that Government wanted today. We set the HIP plans.
Okay, so that would be useful. I'm happy to participate in
That
that.
is
For the history
right here.
stuff, I think the history stuff, I only came to help provide any history that in my experience, but I thought it was to other people who didn't know it. Everybody here knows it. Or
I don't know all the details.
you don't know all the details.
I'm interested.
Just see the history there.
Get a
And
private
Paul,
lesson from
maybe
Dimitri. Well, I've certainly got various.
Okay, well, that's
pieces,
good then.
but,
I'll participate in enjoy watching you guys learn.
Did we want it after we do the history? Did we want to? I could also quickly present our last action plan, just so everyone's aware of it. Like we don't have to discuss it. We don't spend the time, but just so that at least everyone's aware.
Action plan for the rest of the year.
Well, our last action plan. Just so it's in his minds, and then because it would be good to work on that, and it gives good context.
Yeah, because I noticed you in your description of the agenda for today, you named 2 things as goals, and they weren't the things that we chose. We chose 3 things: homelessness, housing, food security. Those were our 3 that I tried to focus on this last year. So I think it wasn't bad. They were additional, I guess, empowerment to people and or something like that. And then I just thought, oh, this for 3 goals.
No,
Nathan,
no. I meant that. But where for that? I meant something different.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Nathan, you would ask if we could talk about that. I suggest we stick with what I suggested, which is history first, then committees, and then if we have time left, we get the other stuff.
Okay.
Is that all right?
That's fine.
I second that. Yeah, it's really wild today. Big party.
well, because they all got their checks.
Sure.
Yeah, super hot.
So so in the board part, we'll talk about HR, finance. Yes, we're in a
I've been
board meeting.
listening to the meeting. That's it. If I decided to do so in silence.
So in the board part, so we set the HR committee, the finance committee. What other points do you want to put? You wanted to talk about the any other points you wanted to talk about today? In the board part?
These are wearing blank sheets for a frequency.
Yeah.
I came to look, I couldn't find it.
We can print more after.
I would like to offer one variant point that I offer my time officially through the government as guardian of the building.
You said it would be silent.
Okay, but because they're setting the agenda of the meeting, so the only place to say my priority would be then, and I'll be silent and wait for your answer
How about we talk about that outside?
after. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Should we? Okay. So is that good? So this is what we're going to do today for sure. And then if we have time for more, we can do. Focus on what? Is that good? Great. Is Garfield and Co.
They went to get pizza down the street.
Yep.
And good deal with them.
Okay. Should we just start?
I just think this meeting doesn't start by 2. I'm good to go.
How about we just start the slideshow? Yeah. We'd like to start the presentation.
Okay.
How long do we want for this presentation? I guess we do want to focus on the history and we don't talk about current projects because we all know the. Great. Hugo, can you hear us okay?
It sounds like you're right next to like a boiling pot of water. There's like all of these like weird pops, or like there's like a lot of wind really close by. Is it next to a fan?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, okay, because that was awful.
Oh,
Is it
Okay.
better now?
It's
Thank you for
like
speaking up.
it's so much better. Thank you so much.
no.
I know that actually an accessibility barrier has been removed for me. Is the best way I can put it. Okay, this is great. Thank you so much, Nathan.
Perfect. And I've started sharing my screen. Can you see? Yeah, you can see. Okay, great. Okay. So this slideshow, it's available online. Blah blah blah. You can also send it to you later. Why is it so small? I guess it's fine. So we all know the what time do you want to try to keep the presentation to? Like
10 minutes.
half it, like 20 minutes, half an hour.
That's 15. I bid 15.
Okay, 15.
Okay. Okay. So
I
we all
second
know the
Nice.
nice. And maybe we could do questions at the end to kind of go through.
Yeah.
Great. So we all know the boundaries of the Milton Park neighborhood, Sherbrooke, Saint Laurent, Pine, and
Hutchison.
University,
Oh, the bounds of.
the whole neighborhood.
It goes all the way
Okay,
to
I
Saint
was
Laurent.
thinking of co-ops. So sorry.
So, and it's a population of around 11,000 people. Dimitri, do you want to take it from here? So, about like the history and like the.
I'm not starting until Garfield and Jeff are here.
It's just that they know
No,
the
they
history.
No, they don't.
Okay.
They wanted to build a fountain there originally?
Yeah.
In the spaghetti incident?
Yeah.
Were you living here yet when the interchange was still
No,
here?
no.
Oh
Yes.
man. That getting rid of that was just about the best infrastructure
Yeah.
project the city has ever done.
It's so funny because
You want to talk about it? Your perspective?
No, that's okay.
I lived here. It was dangerous and scary for women to walk through the tunnel. It was graffiti and it was dark. And that was the only access you could get past the highway kind of to the mountain.
And what happened was that the Urban Ecology Center applied for a research grant, and we carried out a comprehensive research on alternative forms of circulation from Pine to Sherbrooke, from University to Saint Famille or Saint Urban.
Mhm.
And at the core of that study was to dismantle the Pine Park interchange. And so in the municipal elections of 1980, the question was raised in a very bold way. I raised it. The candidate also raised it following me. And when the federal government announced a new financial program to help infrastructure program, we pressured the mayor to start dismantling the thing. But before we did that, I also have to say for Bruno's information, because he probably doesn't know this, that the McGill Student Council created a security group of students who could be called upon to help women and children to cross the underpass while it was still there. And it was used. And that was a good collaboration with
I was at the
Imagine
then.
both the beauty
Yeah.
and the sadness of having to need that.
There we go, some photos.
So we got a grant of, so the city got a grant of $25 or $27 million to dismantle it. There it is. And to build a new simple crossroad. Okay? And a big public meeting was held at the auditorium of the Hotel Dieu, which was packed with people. That's the level of interest that there was.
It was huge, I remember.
And the city official, the civil servant who was responsible, the politician who was responsible for the project, said we were going to have to cut down 400 trees in order to build a new uproar. But we're going to put 800 new trees in. So there it is.
Get from here,
Right.
you had to walk along this thing, along the edge of this highway, a tiny little sidewalk, cut across an intersection, which is blind from cars coming by, come under this thing, under the bridge and over. And it was like a similar story for each other, but it was crazy.
It's actually horrible. That's horrible.
And all of this was done in order to accelerate traffic along Pine Avenue faster.
Yeah.
That was the mayor's, Jean Drapeau's dream to have traffic go faster. And so it was, and it's a remarkable piece of new urban planning. And I don't know if you have that experience, but every European that comes to the city that I know, who knows me or who takes them around, and who sees this open space, they say, how can you possibly have this open space in the middle of the city? I said, well, we did it. Thank you, Garfield.
We're still recovering from the Drapeau administration.
So Jean Drapeau approved this and had it built.
Jean Drapeau is the one who built the original monster.
He was
But Gerald Tremblay was the mayor who took it down.
And it's kind of funny because Drapeau was horticulteur, right? And he kind of, did.
no, that was the one before him who was horticulteur.
Jean Drapeau, c'est lui qui s'occupait du jardin botanique.
No, you're
Papa?
thinking of before Tremblay, the one before Tremblay, Bourque, Pierre Bourque.
Mais non.
Yeah.
Bourque aussi, mais d'abord Jean Drapeau.
I don't think so. Ran the botanical garden.
Yeah, he created the botanical garden.
It was created under his administration, but he didn't. He
At the
wasn't
vision of
himself.
Expo 64, 67, where I got to meet the Queen in person. And you know what? My father was chef in the Navy. Can you imagine? 1,300 hungry Dimitri and you to feed 6 times a day.
So once
Okay,
you
so
two guys
listen.
settle, I'll start, okay?
There should be one more chair. for
Okay, I
you,
can move.
Jeff, is there?
Oh,
Great, so we can start. Go to and I guess to just post that, how much do people know about the
Once Jeff is
history?
comfortable.
On a scale of 1 to 5?
Can I stand?
So I'm going to start,
Just
and
let
I'm
me
going to start with a year, a significant year, 1956. Why 1956? Because the then Soviet leader and General Secretary of the Communist Party, Nikita Khrushchev, in front of the 20th Congress of the party, the Communist Party in the Soviet Union, admitted.
Sorry.
It's fine.
I'm gonna lose my mind.
It's fine. It's fine.
Admitted for the first time that Stalin had created major crimes. And he also admitted that, yes, indeed, there was anti-Semitism in the Communist Party. This created shockwaves amongst all the communist parties across the world. And here in Quebec, amongst the people who resigned from the Communist Party were three people. One was Arnold Eisenman. The second one was Norman Nuremberg. And the third one, I forget his name. And these three people crossed the street and started selling insurance, and eventually established a real estate company called Concordia Estates Limited.
No way.
And Concordia Estates Limited was responsible for building Plasma Venture. So they had a kind of feather in their hat. But in the meantime, in the rest of the 50s, they started buying property in this area. They started buying houses all along Hutchison Street from Milton all the way to Pine, along Park Avenue on both sides of the street, and along Jean Mance on both sides of the street, and along Saint Famille on the west side of the street. Gradually, they were buying building after building after building, because after the Second World War, these buildings had really deteriorated. And although they were not slums, they were very, very,
Rundown.
very,
Rundown.
I mean, somebody asked me the other day, when did I move into this neighborhood? I said 1972. And I was like, well, what rent were you paying for a 9-room house? I said $104. But now it's not that, of course. So I just wanted to tell you that these characters, these three characters, drove Concordia State Limited with the background that they had. And it's important for me to mention all that because in 1968, which was one of the most significant years in the history of the 20th century, there were massive youth rebellions, starting from New York City at Columbia University all the way to Paris and Nanterre. And I could show you a book that has all the countries where there were major uprising against the war in Vietnam, against social justice, and so on. So it's a very useful document to know how significant 1968 was. Why am I saying this? Because what happened was that on St. Urban Street, there was a community center, which was called the University Settlement. University Settlement was a form of community center that was founded by the remarkable Jane Addams in Chicago. It was a kind of community center that had a lot of interplay between the users and the people who worked there and the board. There was a lot of interaction between them. And so the University Settlement had as its program director Lucia Kowalik, who had a whole bunch of responsibilities. And so in 1968, one of the community organizers rushed into the building and said, I have terrible news. I have terrible news. What is it, Florence? We've just heard that a real estate company, Concordia Estates Limited, intends to demolish the 6-block area from Hutchison all the way to Saint Famille and from Milton all the way to Pine and build the so-called city of the 21st century, this thing here, in 3 phases.
And just to add that these are
Maquettes.
there are several
Versions of them.
like concepts. So the one they went with was this one.
Didn't they make like a physical model?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I saw it.
Well, there is, the physical model is at the Canadian Center of Architecture. If you ever want to go and see it, it's all there. In the archives of the Milton Park Citizens Committee, by the way, are all there, scientifically classified. If you want to see old periodicals, minutes of the committee, it's all there. It's a magnificent job of preserving our history. And we should know that and be proud of that.
Can we go there as board
Of
members?
course. Go there and you speak to the chief librarian and say, I would like to know what is in here and I would like to look at it as a citizen. You're perfectly right.
I'd like to go there too.
And we also had an exhibit there 5 years ago.
I remember that.
And we had about 400 people who came just to see the exhibit and to hear the event that took place in the auditorium. So, 1968. So what did we do? Well, the relationship between the University Settlement and the McGill School of Social Work was very close. A lot of the people who were studying social work at McGill were volunteering as field workers, part of their academic work. They were field workers associated with the community center, and in this case, the University Settlement. And there were some rather remarkable people there. Women, of course, because women are the best community organizers. You know that about you?
Yes.
But-
They can multitask.
Anyways, and one of the most remarkable amongst them was a young woman by the name of Sue White, who became Sue Allwood. And she and others called together a number of citizens, and in 1968 we founded the Milton Park Citizens Committee. And we started door knocking. We knocked on 800 doors, alerting the neighborhood of this forthcoming catastrophe. And of the 800, 400 said, we're very alarmed, we want to help. And that was sort of the beginning of a militant citizens action. What is interesting about the Milton Park Citizens Committee from that day on is that it worked in close collaboration with the University Settlement. And at the University Settlement at that time, there was a food depot for people who needed food. There was a clothing depot for people who needed clothing. I was president of the board at one time. We established a credit union. There we had a community library. There was a daycare. And it was also an organization that first bought a piece of property to create social housing. With a building just beside the University Settlement, bought another one on Back Street. So these were the first experiments in social housing started by people at the University Settlement.
Just to say, can I just add, the University Settlement, it was where the ARMP's headquarters is, correct?
Well, it's now the
St. Urban.
Yeah, it's now the multicultural Centre Multicultural. That's the official name of the building.
And it's got social like non-profit housing or co-op on top of it.
Centre multi-ethnique.
Saint Louis.
Thank you. And we also had the first community garden on the roof. But we were told by people at the McGill School of Agriculture at St. Anne de Bellevue that in those days there was too much lead that came out of the pipes of the cars, and it would go up the 2 floors of the settlement building and deposit itself on the vegetation. So it could not be consumed safely. So we did it 1 year, we learned our lesson, we couldn't repeat it. Anyways, it was a real hub. Okay? And it was a real hub of many things. For example, there was a legal clinic in the University Settlement. That is to say that in those days, coming out of the 60s, there were lawyers, young lawyers, who volunteered to be your lawyer for a particular issue. And there was the beginning of a medical clinic too, and that later dovetailed into the CLSCs. So there were many things that came out of that building. That's how dynamic it was. So it's not surprising that the Milton Park Citizens Committee was born in that building by the people around it. So the book, I'm a rather tough and cool person because I force people to read. And one of the books that you have to read is by Claire Hellman, called The Milton Park Affair, published by Vehicle Press. It was for a long time on the website of the CCMP. I don't know if it's still there. I have one copy, which I'm not prepared to lend to anybody. You can come to my house and read through it. Take pictures if you want. But I learned how to make my books.
I think the PDF is also available for free online.
But you could find
It's
it
this
in the
book here.
library. For example, Hugo, our real person, person to check it out at the library. I'm sure it's in Red Bank.
Oh,
It's worthwhile reading. What? Did you say something?
yeah, I believe I've given a copy of the yellow booklet to Nathan. Is that
There could be more than one copy.
well? I've seen the yellow booklet 100%.
No, that's not it. This is it.
This is one we want.
This is it.
Yeah.
Oh, the one on the right. Oh, okay.
Claire Hellman.
The
And-
Milton Park Affair.
The blue.
Claire Hellman was a journalist, and she
Claire Hellman.
she
Talk
worked very
about
hard.
scenes through hell.
She worked very
Claire
hard to
Hellman.
write that book, and it's like a story. The book is easy to read, and she describes the main characters, but she was very overwhelmed by the story, and it's very dimensional. I'm quoted liberally in this book, but she never interviewed me. She heard characteristic things that I would say to other people, and she couldn't know.
Wow.
Are you okay with that?
Well, it's not correct.
Oh, but it rings true?
Yeah, it's pretty true. I
It rings
don't
true,
disagree
then that's
with
okay.
anything that you said. So that's one book that should be read, but it's incomplete. In other words, it was finished before we won. Now, before we won, I should say the following. And I'm particularly forthright about this because we won because we had a double strategy. First, we had a grassroots strategy where we brought together, remarkably, and this is in the 80s now, in the 60s, into the 70s, we brought together the most active French-speaking and English-speaking organizations together. Of course, at the core of it were many of the young activists at McGill and at Concordia. And the relationship between Anglophone and Francophone community participants and activists was very good in the umbrella of our community. They immediately recognized themselves in it, they supported it. And we also had the support of a trade union, the construction workers of the CNTU. FTQ construction workers wouldn't touch it, of course. Because, building new buildings is jobs for them. That's their priority. Anyways, it was a remarkable coalition at the grassroots level and had a political impact. And then there was another level, a more political level, in quotation marks, which was put together by people who are members of Heritage Montreal. Heritage Montreal was an organization founded to preserve the historical architectural legacy of our city. And one of the key movers and shakers of Heritage Montreal was the architect Phyllis Lambert. Well, our Lucia, was also an active member of that Heritage Montreal. And Lucia, I should say in all modesty, taught Phyllis Lambert that it's not enough to save this building and that building. You have to save heritage neighborhoods. And she brought Phyllis Lambert into this neighborhood, talked to her and tried to convince her. And Phyllis Lambert, who looked around and saw all these magnificent Victorian houses, said, we have to do that. And so Heritage Montreal helped starting the political route towards convincing the Central Housing and Mortgage Corporation, which is the main federal crown corporation that is responsible for housing in Canada, to get them to help take over as much as possible of the neighborhood. And how was that done? Well, it was done, I explained to Sal a few weeks ago, by throwing our weight around Ottawa. We got the support of a number of senators, and we managed to get the support of 2 members of the Pierre Elliott Trudeau cabinet. It was brought to the level of the cabinet, and the conclusion was this neighborhood had to be saved. Well, the Trudeau government was defeated, or the Liberal Party, federal Liberal Party, at the forthcoming at the future federal election. Conservatives came in and Joe Parc, and of course they were devoted to private education and all the rest of that, and they were less interested in that. We had to really push them hard, and they refused to move. So what did I do? I zeroed in on Lenny Levesque, who was the head of the Parti Québécois at the time. And we had a meeting, he and I and others, at the corner of Jeanne Mance and Pine, where there is now the Darcy Levy building in the basement. We had a meeting with Lenny Levesque. And I said, Monsieur Levesque, we're in a situation here where we have a conservative government and we want to explain to you. And he said to me, Dimitri, inquiète-toi pas, il y a un référendum sur le réforme. Si ce n'est pas réglé avant le référendum, ça va être une question clé pendant le référendum. Well, the word got out that the leader of the Parti Québécois was ready to make it a major issue during the referendum. Well, and that word went to Ottawa. 3 weeks later, there was a crucial meeting in this building between an organization that we founded called SPOON, Société de Protection Urbaine de Montréal, which was an OBNL that was created in order to acquire the sixth block area away from Concordia City and to build our project. In this building, there was a meeting between the leaders of the SPOON, who were Phyllis Lambert as president, I was a member of the board, and Robert Cohen was director general. And here in this building, in that room in the back, we said, listen, we're not going to allow ourselves to be blocked by CMHC. This project has to go forward. And if it doesn't go up the street in the alternative building, 4720, there is a meeting taking place where they're planning a demonstration. If you go collaborate. And I was at that meeting up there. Well, within 3/4 of an hour, the discussion changed. The tone of the discussion changed in the back. And within 2 hours, 2 black limousines arrived here on the street, right above this building. Black limousines from Ottawa. And the heavies from the sheet came up. Came to the meeting. Said, how can we solve this? And so Bob Cohen said, this is the way we solve it.
Some good leverage.
And to make a long story short, we managed to pull enough strings at that level, pushing and shoving, using guerrilla tactics, dirty tactics, tactics of threats and intimidation. Elections are a perfect moment to say, you better move your toughish, otherwise you have trouble. And to wrap it up at that level, we got $27 million, not in money, but in guarantees to get mortgages. So the federal government, the CMHC, guaranteed our buying or lending the necessary money to buy the land and the properties. Well, then came another big question. How much interest are we going to pay for this? Well, the financial institutions wanted 7.5%. Well, if we want to pay 7.5%, a lot of the original inhabitants of the will have to pay rents that are, we'll start having to go to live in Montreal North or the east end of the city. So again, we turned on the heat, loud shouting, demonstrations, and so on. So anyways, to make that chapter succinct, we got the financial institutions to 2.5% interest. And with that low interest rate, dear people, we managed to commit ourselves to a very basic value, and that is to make the original inhabitants of the sixth block area comfortable to stay here. So that's why the Community Milton Parc, the CMP, is a federation of 22 organizations, 16 cooperatives, and 6 nonprofit associations. And the difference between the two, very basically, is that in a cooperative, as a member, you're expected to participate in the maintenance committee or the finance committee or that committee. So you have to be a participant, you have to be a stakeholder. Whereas in the nonprofit housing association, you may have a disability, you may have a physical disability, you may have psychological problem, whatever you need assistance. So the board consists of social workers and people like that to help things along. And that's essentially the difference between the two organizations. And here we come to a very fundamental thing that I urge all members of the board to read. Okay? This is really absolutely essential to read. There's a brief history. But there is also the social contract in here, which took, we can talk about meetings. I can mention to you at least 50 community meetings that have to take place to get this, what's called the Declaration of Co-Ownership. This is a social contract that tells the residents, the members of the cooperatives and nonprofits, what we can do and what we cannot do. We cannot tamper with the architectural envelope of the buildings. We cannot cut trees at will. There are a number of things that we cannot do externally, and there are a number of things that we cannot do internally as well. And most importantly, we have to give priority to people of low income. There's a scale there. How many people we can allow at different income levels. It's a very important legal document. So this is a very useful thing to read and to have in hand.
And at the back is the map.
Yeah. Well, what I'm going to then show you is the in other words, all the colored. There's nothing itself. That's what I wanted to show you. The back. It shows you all the cooperatives and all the nonprofit associations that, but in between all of this, what we managed to do is the following. Again, using sharp political tactics. The Concordia Estates Limited Project had envisaged 3 phases that they would build this thing on. And what we managed to do is take the first phase off the market by getting the city councilors to change the zoning regulations. And these were city councilors of Jean Drapeau, by the way. 2 local city councilors of Jean Drapeau. They were one at a pastry shop, one at a bakery. That kind of person. And those 2 guys proposed a bylaw which did not allow any new development to take place in the neighborhood that was higher than the original buildings. So that cut Concordia Estates at the knees. So they were stuck. That plus the oil crisis, that plus the down effects of after the Olympics, the 76 Olympics, really affected them. And so Lucia and I and a number of people said, well, now maybe this is the time to meet Nuremberg. And Lucia picked up the phone and said, we want to meet you. So they met in Nuremberg's office. And she said, look, we're a very well organized committee and we're a very organized community. And we don't want you to proceed with this project. And Nuremberg looked at Lucia and said, make us and that's where the results of that meeting in the back took place. have the money, you have the commitment, you have the political interest, move on. And that's what they did. They surrendered phase 2 and phase 3. And so we did what we did. And the Spoon organization hired architects, hired engineers, hired community organizers, about 15, 20 people, knocking on doors and getting people involved, showing them how to get together and so on and so forth. It was a very educational project. And it went forward from there. Now, let me say one thing in conclusion, before the conclusion. In addition to the books that Nathan showed you, this is the book that brings the story of Claire Hellman up to date, very inclusive, highly praised, highly reviewed. You can find it in the McGill Library. You can find it at the bookstore of the Canadian Center of Architecture. And what it stresses is something that Cindy, I'm sure, will agree with, and Jeff also, is sort of something that is not openly talked about in the Milton Park project. That the land is owned in common. 6-block land is owned in common. We have taken off the capitalist market 6-block. And therefore, there could be no buying and selling. There could be no speculation. So Sal, Cindy, Nathan, and myself, and Jeff are perfectly secure in our houses. We know that it cannot be sold under our feet. Now, does that give you a sense of security for your life? It does. It does.
Now you have to find a place here in me.
We'll work on that. So this is what this book deals with, the significance of the land trust. It's called a fiducie foncier in French. And interestingly enough, this is the kind of climate we created. The law to allow that to happen was presented by our local provincial member of parliament, who was very sympathetic to us. He was a liberal. And he and Bob Cohen and a very well-known extraordinary notaries, François Frenette, formulated the law. They presented it in the National Assembly under the rubric of co-ownership, and it was passed. They may not have known they were passing, but they passed it. So the law is secure. And we're perfectly within our rights, and all of this is in this second important book. And that I wanted to show you a sort of a brief history. I mean, I can elaborate each one of these chapters, but I really recommend that you read these 2 books plus this thing here. And I not only recommend it, I would insist that if you want to be a member of the board, I'm not asking you to commit all of these pages to memory. I want you to read them and to really absorb what's in there, because it's a remarkable story. And I'm invited regularly to Europe to talk about how we did it. And that's it.
All of those, like the yellow guide and those 2 other documents up there, we have PDFs of them. So if you don't have them, we can send them to you.
Are these books published by Black Rose Books?
Only this one.
This is Vehicle Press. This is published by CCMP. And that I put together actually, based upon documentation in the archives of the
Can I see a
Canadian
copy?
Center of Architecture. What?
Can I see a copy?
This of this?
The
Of which? This?
Yeah.
We, in my co-op, every new member gets a binder
Yeah.
with this book and their contract and our internal bylaws and all that. It's sort of like
Basically,
you have been chosen, required reading.
I have a question about, because you said the project was a great success and ultimately a victory for the people who fought it. But there was, at least like the bounds of that victory are the second and third phase, right? But the first phase still occurred.
Well, the first phase are these buildings there.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if
And,
It was
What's the-
timing. The conservative government permitted them to start.
and the other thing is that the original project was, let's get this, supported financially by the Ford Foundation, an American foundation, which was then committed to something called urban
Renewal.
oh yeah, the
Renewal.
highway.
It was just crap, really. But they were into that kind of stuff. So they gave money to Concordia System. The British Postal Union gave money.
The British Postal Union.
British Postal Union. Well, these unions, have a lot of money. They need to invest. They want to make money on their money. The Great West Life, which is a Winnipeg-based big insurance company, probably the biggest in Canada, and of course the Royal Bank of Canada. These were the four financial players. Well,
They were selling it hard. They were making it like it was the modern thing, like George Jetson. They even talked about a subway line going underneath the building at one point, crossing the mountain. They were selling it really hard. So some people who are sitting in a cubicle and have to choose someone to give money, they thought they were investing in a brave new world.
but when they deal with people like me, they have to expect that I play dirty. That's what I did.
As the saying goes, you poke the bull, you're going to get the horns.
That's right. And one of the things we did is we sent a group of people to the annual meeting of the Ford Foundation in Chicago. And we produced a leaflet, a brochure explaining, what their money is going to and how it's going to displace people who enjoy the neighborhood, want to renovate their neighborhood, so on and so forth. And the Ford Foundation in 6 months pulled out. So that's the kind of thing you have to be prepared to do.
And you also did an occupation of
Yes. We also, thank you for reminding me. Why is it called the Milton Park Scenic System? Why is it called Milton Park? It's not called Milton Park. It's called the McGill Ghetto. I regret to say. Anyways, it was because right here, just past the church, where the new La Cité building was, were the offices of the local offices of Concordia City. And having exhausted ourselves, petitions, public meetings, demonstrations, and so forth, we came to the end of the road and said, look, let's occupy that office. Bring it, make it into a major issue in newspapers. And so we occupied their offices. All these people.
What year was that?
This was 1972.
Wow.
Or 71. And at the far end
72.
there, you could see Lucia with the carriage of Riel. And Joe Nabio, Callahan, little Adam. Anyways,
We marched with
I
one
was
of
in
our
high school.
teachers
I had no
from Collège de Montréal
understanding
across
of
the mountain to come into school.
I came
and, so we came up, we had to take, they called the police, and the police came. Either we drag you out or you come out on your own. And I said, look, we're going to be dragged out, we'll come out. We were all arrested, we were put in the panier de salade, and they took us off.
The paddy wagon.
Yeah, the paddy wagon. They took us down to the jail at Old Montreal.
Plus now.
And we spent whole
Yeah,
day.
we all been there. We all been
we
there.
spent the whole day in jail, and then they let us go. And then we had a trial. Thank you for reminding me. But the trial was quite remarkable. It turned out that the judge, a man by the name of James
I just
Ferguson,
moved my head from the fan like this so much better.
Ferguson, who happened to have been a member of the board of directors of the University Center,
Yes.
and he was a very liberal